The Great Hall of Unity Prime stretched out like a cathedral of glass and light. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her hands resting on the smooth surface as she looked out at the gathered representatives of 47 alien species. The treaty document glowed on the holographic display before her, thousands of pages reduced to streams of light and data. "This is a historic moment," said High Counselor Vethrin, his silver skin shimmering under the station's artificial lights. The Valdrine always spoke with a voice like music, smooth and reassuring. "Humanity joins the Galactic Council as full members, protected under the Treaty of Eternal Peace." Chen felt a swell of pride. 5 years ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Then the first contact had happened over Mars. The Valdrine had come in peace, offering friendship and knowledge. They had introduced humanity to the Council, to the vast network of civilizations that spanned the galaxy. And now finally Earth would take its place among them. "We are honored," Chen said, her voice carrying through the hall. Behind her, the human delegation stood in their crisp uniforms. General Marcus Webb, Admiral Yuri Konstantin, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, and a dozen others who had worked tirelessly to bring humanity to this moment. Counselor Thexkar of the Korthax stepped forward. The insectoid creature clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was a gesture of approval. "The treaty ensures peace for all," he said. "No more war, no more conflict. All species working together for prosperity." Chen nodded and pressed her palm to the scanner. Her biometric signature flowed into the document, binding humanity to its terms. Earth had already begun the process of integration. The outdated military fleet would be decommissioned. Human ships would join the Council Defense Force. Technology would be shared freely. Borders would open. Back on Earth, billions watched the ceremony. In New York, London, Beijing, Lagos, São Paulo, people celebrated in the streets. The fear of being alone in a hostile universe had finally ended. Humanity had friends now, allies, protection. But in a quiet corner of the observation deck, Admiral Konstantin frowned as he scrolled through the treaty on his personal tablet. He had been reading it for weeks, going through every section, every clause, every footnote. Something had been bothering him. Article 286, he muttered to himself. Subsection 12C. Dr. Okonkwo approached him, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was a xenoanthropologist, one of the first humans to seriously study alien cultures. "You should be celebrating, Yuri. This is what we worked for." "Read this," Konstantin said, handing her the tablet. Okonkwo squinted at the text. The legal language was dense, translated from Valdrine Standard into English through layers of interpretation. "Protective custodianship," she read aloud. "Species deemed developmentally transitional may be placed under temporary council oversight for their own benefit and security." "What does that mean?" Konstantin asked. "I don't know," Okonkwo admitted. "It sounds like a safety measure, like if a species was in danger the council could step in to help, or take over," Konstantin said darkly. Okonkwo laughed. "You're paranoid. Look around, Yuri. These people have had peace for 10,000 years. They're not conquerors. They're not here to hurt us," Konstantin wanted to believe her. He watched as Ambassador Chen shook hands with Vethrin, as the cameras flashed and recorded the moment for history. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe years in the military had made him see threats everywhere. The next morning, Konstantin requested a meeting with the council leadership. They received him in a smaller chamber, less grand than the main hall, but still impressive. Vethrin and Thexkar sat on one side of the table. Konstantin sat alone on the other. "Admiral," Vethrin said warmly, "how can we help you?" Article 286, subsection 12C, Konstantin said. "I want to understand it better." Thexkar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "A formality, Admiral. Nothing more. Has it ever been used?" Konstantin asked. "Not in living memory," Vethrin assured him. "It was written into the original treaty thousands of years ago as a theoretical safeguard. But in practice, every species that joins the council thrives. There is never a need for intervention. But theoretically," Konstantin pressed, "the council could declare humanity transitional and take control of our government?" "Only in the most extreme circumstances," Vethrin said, his musical voice taking on a slightly harder edge. "If a species posed a danger to itself or others, if there was risk of catastrophic war or collapse, but humanity shows no such signs. You are peaceful, rational, eager to cooperate. There is nothing to worry about." Constantine studied the alien's face, trying to read the expression. Valdrine features were difficult for humans to interpret. Was Vethrin being honest, or was there something hidden behind those silver eyes? I hope you're right, Constantine said finally. We are always right, Admiral, Thexkar said. The Council has maintained peace for 10 millennia. Trust in the system. Trust in us. Constantine left the meeting unsatisfied. But what could he do? Earth had already signed the treaty. The celebrations were still going on. To voice suspicions now would make him look like a warmonger, someone stuck in humanity's violent past. Over the next weeks, the integration proceeded smoothly. Human ships began docking at Council stations for retrofitting. The old weapon systems were removed, replaced with standardized Council technology. Earth's military academies started teaching Council combat doctrine. Human scientists received access to the vast databases of galactic knowledge. Dr. Okonkwo threw herself into research, studying the cultures and histories of the Council species. She interviewed Valdrine scholars, Korthax historians, representatives from dozens of worlds. Everyone spoke of the peace, the prosperity, the unity. But she noticed something odd. When she asked about species that had joined the Council in the past few centuries, there was very little information. The Yithran, for instance. They had been spacefaring for 800 years before joining the Council 2 centuries ago, but now they seemed to exist only on the periphery, working as laborers and service crews. What happened to the Yithran civilization? She asked a Valdrine historian. They are part of the Council, the historian said. They have found their place. But they used to be warriors, Okonkwo said. They had a rich military tradition, complex honor codes. Now they just work on construction crews? The historian's expression remained placid. They evolved beyond such primitive concepts. War and honor are relics of a savage past. They have found peace in service. Okonkwo wanted to ask more, but something in the historian's tone suggested the conversation was over. She moved on to other topics, but the question lingered in her mind. Meanwhile, Admiral Constantine quietly issued orders to a small group of trusted officers. Despite the treaty, despite the decommissioning, certain ships would maintain their cores at operational levels. Certain weapons caches would remain accessible. Call it insurance. Call it paranoia. But Constantine had not survived 30 years in the military by trusting people who told him not to worry. Ambassador Chen worked tirelessly at Unity Prime, navigating the complex politics of the Council. She attended sessions, voted on resolutions, built relationships with other delegates. Everything seemed perfect. But in the dark spaces between stars, in the asteroid belts and outer system installations, human workers noticed alien survey teams cataloging resources with unusual thoroughness. Trade negotiators found themselves agreeing to terms that heavily favored alien corporations. Human captains were denied access to certain jump routes, told the lanes were restricted for safety reasons. Small things, easily explained. Probably meaningless, or maybe they were the first signs that the Treaty of Eternal Peace was something else entirely. Something humanity would come to regret. Something that would teach the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you underestimate the species from Earth. But for now, in those early days, most of humanity remained blissfully unaware. They trusted the treaty. They trusted the Council. They believed that peace was real. They would learn otherwise soon enough. 3 months had passed since the signing ceremony. On the surface, humanity's integration into the Galactic Council appeared to be proceeding smoothly. Trade agreements had been finalized. Human students attended Council universities. Cultural exchange programs flourished. But beneath the pleasant surface, cracks were beginning to show. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo sat in her office on Unity Prime, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from dozens of sources. She had been researching Council history for weeks now, following a hunch that had started as a whisper in the back of her mind and grown into a persistent alarm. The pattern was there, clear as day once you knew to look for it. Every 2 to 3 centuries, a new species joined the Council. There would be celebrations, integration, prosperity. Then gradually, that species would fade into the background. Their ships would disappear from the major trade routes. Their representatives would stop speaking at Council sessions. Their homeworlds would become quiet, their people scattered across the galaxy in service positions. She had compiled a list. The Yithran, joined 237 years ago, once fierce warriors with a code of honor that valued strength and loyalty above all else. Now they worked as manual laborers, construction crews, miners. When Okonkwo had tried to visit their homeworld, she had been denied permission. Restricted access, they said. Environmental concerns the Pelthene joined 412 years ago. Master engineers who had built magnificent cities on their ice-covered planet. Their technology had been considered revolutionary. Their architectural design studied across the galaxy. Now, Okonkwo could not find a single Pelthene in a leadership position anywhere in the council. They worked in factories, manufacturing plants, following designs created by others. The Vraxi, the Ptolemites, the Hesh. Species after species, the same pattern. Rise, integrate, fade. What happened to you all? Okonkwo whispered to the images on her screen. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Admiral Constantine entered, looking grim. You've seen it too, Okonkwo said. It was not a question. The survey teams, Constantine said, sitting down heavily. They're mapping every resource in our system. Every asteroid, every moon, every mineral deposit. And the way they're doing it, it's not for trade purposes. It's military assessment. The trade agreements, Okonkwo added. I've been analyzing them. On paper they look fair, but the fine print is devastating. We're essentially giving them raw materials at cost while buying finished goods at premium prices. In 20 years, Earth's economy will be completely dependent on council imports. Constantine nodded. And the jump routes. 12 major hyperspace lanes have been declared off-limits to human ships. They say it's for safety. But those lanes all lead to the outer colonies. They're isolating us, cutting Earth off from our own settlements. It's deliberate, Okonkwo said. I think it's always been deliberate. The treaty isn't about peace. It's about control. We need proof, Constantine said. Hard evidence. Something we can take to Ambassador Chen and the human governments. Over the next 2 weeks, Okonkwo worked around the clock. She interviewed lower-level workers from the subjugated species, people the council overlooked. A Yithran maintenance worker told her about the old days, about the fleets his people once commanded, about the pride they had felt. Then the council had invoked Article 286, protective custodianship they called it. The Yithran were deemed too aggressive, too warlike. For their own good, the council had taken over. A Pelthene engineer working late in the station's recycling center shared documents. Old files showing how his species had been forced to turn over their technology patents to council corporations. How their educational system had been reformed to remove advanced technical training. How slowly and systematically they had been reduced to simple workers. The evidence mounted. Okonkwo compiled it all into a comprehensive report. The pattern was undeniable. The Galactic Council was not a peaceful alliance. It was a sophisticated system of subjugation, using treaties and laws instead of weapons. She requested an emergency session with the human delegation. Ambassador Chen, Admiral Constantine, General Webb, and the senior staff gathered in a secure conference room. What you're about to see will change everything, Okonkwo said, and began her presentation. For 2 hours they watched and listened. The faces around the table grew darker with each revelation. Ambassador Chen, who had been so proud to sign the treaty, looked physically ill. This can't be true, she said weakly. Vethran assured me. The council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. They have, Okonkwo said. But peace achieved through domination isn't really peace. It's just very efficient tyranny. We need to go public with this, General Webb said. Tell Earth, tell everyone. They'll deny it, Constantine said. And without access to council archives, we can't prove intent. It will look like paranoia. But they had to try. Ambassador Chen called for an emergency council session. The great hall filled with representatives from every member species. Chen stood at the podium, her voice shaking with anger and betrayal. We have discovered a pattern, she announced. A pattern of exploitation and subjugation hidden behind the language of peace. The hall erupted. Vethran stood, his silver face showing concern. Ambassador Chen, please. These are serious accusations. Chen presented the evidence. The data on subjugated species, the economic analyses, the restricted jump routes. Everything Okonkwo had compiled. Thexkar's mandibles clicked rapidly. This is a misunderstanding. Young species often struggle with integration. We provide guidance support. You provide chains, Chen said. Invisible ones, but chains nonetheless. The council went into recess. For 3 hours, the leadership deliberated in private chambers. When they returned, Vethran's musical voice had lost its warmth. The council has reviewed the situation, he announced, and we have determined that humanity is displaying concerning behavioral patterns, paranoia, aggression, Resistance to guidance. Constantine felt ice form in his stomach. He knew what was coming. Therefore, Vethrin continued, in accordance with Article 286, subsection 12C of the Treaty of Eternal Peace, humanity is hereby declared a developmentally transitional species. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies are placed under protective council oversight. The words fell like hammer blows. Around the hall, representatives from other species remained silent. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked resigned, as if they had seen this play out before. What does that mean? Chen demanded. It means, Thexkar said, that for your own protection and the security of the council, certain measures must be enacted. Human governments will be dissolved and replaced with council administrators. Your military fleet will be fully decommissioned and absorbed into council forces. All human-controlled stations and installations will be transferred to council authority. These measures are temporary, until humanity demonstrates readiness for full autonomy. This is insane, General Webb shouted, rising from his seat. You can't just take over our civilization. We can, Vethrin said calmly. You signed the treaty. You agreed to abide by council law. This is council law. You tricked us, Chen said, her voice breaking. You lied. We offered peace, Vethrin said. You chose to interpret that as weakness. You will surrender control of your fleet within 30 standard days. Council administrators will arrive on Earth within the week. This session is adjourned. The human delegation stood in stunned silence as the council representatives filed out. Around them, the representatives of the subjugated species watched with knowing eyes. The Yithran worker Okonkwo had interviewed was there, sweeping the floors. He met her gaze and nodded slowly, a gesture of solidarity and shared suffering. Ambassador Chen turned to Constantine. What do we do? The Admiral's face was hard as stone. We do what humans have always done when someone tries to put chains on us. We fight. Against the entire council? Webb asked. That's suicide? Maybe, Constantine said. But I'd rather die fighting than live as slaves. And I don't think I'm the only human who feels that way. He pulled out his communication device and entered a long dormant code. Across human space, in hidden facilities and secret installations, alarms began to sound. Protocol Nightfall, the contingency plan Constantine had quietly maintained despite the treaty, was now active. The council had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn, and they were about to learn that the species from Earth did not surrender easily. They did not submit quietly, and they certainly did not trust a treaty more than they trusted their own ability to fight for freedom. The war that wasn't supposed to happen was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The council made a fundamental miscalculation. They had studied humanity's history, seen the wars and conflicts, the violence and chaos. They concluded that humans were aggressive but ultimately controllable. Like the Yithran before them, humanity would rage briefly, then submit to the inevitable. The council had perfected this process over 10,000 years. They knew how to break a species, but they did not truly understand what they were dealing with. Admiral Yuri Konstantin stood in the command center of Earth Defense Station Zeta, deep in the outer solar system. Around him, officers worked frantically at their stations. Messages flooded in from across human space. The council had issued their ultimatum: surrender the fleet in 30 days or face enforcement action. Status report, Constantine ordered. Captain Maria Torres looked up from her console. Protocol Nightfall is fully activated. All hidden facilities are responding. The Oort Cloud shipyards have been brought to full operational status. How many ships do we have? 89 combat-capable vessels, sir. Another 40 in various stages of construction. It's not much compared to the council fleet. It's enough, Constantine said. It has to be enough. The truth was, Constantine had never trusted the council. Not completely. While Earth's governments had celebrated the treaty and begun decommissioning the fleet, he had maintained a shadow program. Skeleton crews on supposedly mothballed ships, weapons caches hidden in asteroids, research facilities buried in ice moons, developing technologies humanity had never disclosed to the council. The official story was that humanity had shared all its technology. The reality was different. Humanity had shared the old models, the documented designs, the things that would satisfy council oversight. But the cutting-edge research, the experimental weapons, the new propulsion systems, those had been kept secret. On Earth, President Maria Ochoa addressed the world. Her face appeared on every screen, every device, every public display. "My fellow humans," she began, "you have heard the Council's declaration. They claim the right to rule us, to control our destiny. They say this is for our protection, for our own good. They are wrong." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Humanity has faced extinction before. We have fought wars, survived plagues, overcome disasters. We have never surrendered our freedom willingly. We will not start now. The Council believes we will submit. They believe we have no choice. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Across Earth, across Mars, across the colonies on Europa and Titan and Ganymede, across the stations and settlements throughout human space, the response was immediate. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed. Factories retooled for war production. Citizens who had been celebrating peace just months ago now prepared for the fight of their lives. The Council dispatched Ambassador Vethrin to Earth one final time. He met with President Ochoa in Geneva, in the same room where the treaty had first been presented to humanity. "This is madness," Vethrin said, his musical voice tinged with what might have been genuine concern. "You cannot fight the entire Council. We have resources beyond your imagination, fleets that span the galaxy. You will be crushed," maybe Ochoa said, "but we'll make you work for it. And every species watching will see that the Council can be resisted, that your system of control isn't inevitable." "You would sacrifice your entire civilization for pride?" Vethrin asked. "For freedom," Ochoa corrected. "There's a difference." Vethrin stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. "The enforcement fleet will arrive in 10 days. 300 ships. The largest armada the Council has assembled in centuries. Surrender then, and we will show mercy." "Come and take it," Ochoa said. The phrase spread across human space like wildfire. "Come and take it." It appeared on banners, on ships, in broadcasts. An ancient defiance given new life in the space age. Admiral Constantine assembled his fleet at Neptune's orbit. 89 ships against 300. The math was brutal, but humanity had never been good at accepting impossible odds. "They'll expect us to fight like them," Constantine told his captains via secure channel. "Orderly formations. Rules of engagement. Honorable combat. We're not going to do that," he outlined his strategy. Hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, weapons the Council had banned centuries ago as barbaric, nuclear mines, relativistic kill missiles, ramming attacks if necessary, every dirty trick humanity had ever devised for war. "They've been at peace for 10,000 years, Constantine said. "They've forgotten what real war looks like. We're going to remind them." Captain Sarah Park of the destroyer Indomitable raised a concern. "Sir, some of these tactics violate the Council's warfare conventions." "We're not members of the Council anymore," Constantine said flatly. "We're insurgents fighting for our survival. There are no rules now." The enforcement fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 300 ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. They formed into precise formations, a display of overwhelming force meant to cow humanity into submission. Admiral Thrawn of the Korthax commanded the fleet. He broadcast a message to all human vessels. "This is your final opportunity to surrender. Power down your ships and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will be met with force." Constantine's response was a single missile, launched from beyond the fleet's sensor range. It accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed before the Council ships detected it. By then it was too late. The relativistic impact destroyed the flagship and 2 escort vessels in a bloom of nuclear fire. "All ships," Constantine ordered, "execute attack pattern Omega. Show them what humanity does to tyrants." What followed was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was a slaughter, and for the first few hours the Council thought they were winning. Their superior numbers and firepower destroyed human ships at a steady rate, but for every human vessel they destroyed, they lost 2 or 3 of their own. Human ships did not retreat when damaged. They charged forward, ramming Council vessels in suicide attacks. Human captains laid minefields in hyperspace lanes, catching Council ships as they jumped. Human fighters, tiny craft that could barely support life, swarmed larger Council vessels like angry wasps, targeting engines and weapons arrays. The Council had expected a fleet engagement. They got guerrilla warfare in space. Captain James Chen, no relation to the ambassador, piloted his fighter into the engine core of a Council battleship. His final transmission was brief, for Earth. Commander Liu detonated her ship's reactor core while docked with a Council carrier. taking it and 4 other vessels with her. Ensign Marcus Webb, grandson of the general, held his position in a disabled ship, manually targeting Council vessels until his life support failed. The names and stories multiplied. Heroes born in fire and vacuum, people who chose to fight rather than submit. After 12 hours of combat, Admiral Thrawn called for a retreat. The enforcement fleet, reduced to just over 100 operational vessels, jumped away from the solar system. Humanity had lost 34 ships, but they had destroyed or disabled nearly 200 Council vessels. The message was clear. Earth could be conquered, but the price would be catastrophic. In the command center, Constantine surveyed the damage reports. They had won, but barely. The fleet was battered, ammunition depleted, crews exhausted. What now? Captain Torres asked. Now, Constantine said, we prepare for the next attack. Because they'll be back. And next time they'll be ready for us. But something else was happening across the galaxy. On worlds subjugated by the Council, people watched the broadcast from the battle. They saw humans fighting impossible odds. They saw the Council fleet retreat. On the Yithran homeworld, an old warrior named Kresh watched the footage and felt something stir in his chest. Something he had thought dead for 2 centuries. Pride, anger, the will to resist. They showed us it is possible, Kresh said to his companions. The humans proved the Council can bleed. Similar conversations were happening on a dozen worlds. The Peltine, the Vraxi, the Ptolemites. Species that had been broken by the Council now saw hope. The Council had wanted to make an example of humanity, to show what happened to species that resisted. But they had made a different kind of example. They had shown that resistance was possible. The war was just beginning. But humanity had already won something more important than a single battle. They had given the galaxy something it had not seen in 10,000 years. Hope. The Battle of Neptune's Gate was only the beginning. The Council had expected a quick victory, a demonstration of power that would bring humanity to heel. Instead, they had suffered a humiliating defeat. Word spread across the galaxy, despite the Council's attempts to control the narrative. You could not hide the loss of 200 ships. On Earth, the mood was defiant but grim. Everyone knew the Council would return with greater force. Factories worked around the clock. Every shipyard, every manufacturing facility, every resource was directed toward the war effort. Civilians volunteered in numbers that surprised even the military leadership. The conscription centers had to turn people away. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, now serving as an intelligence advisor, worked to understand the Council's next move. She studied their history, their patterns, their methods. What she discovered was not encouraging. They've never lost before, she told President Ochoa during a secure briefing. Not in 10,000 years. Every species that resisted was eventually crushed. The Council has resources we can barely imagine. Then why did they retreat? Ochoa asked. Because we caught them off guard, Okonkwo said. They expected us to fight by their rules. Now they'll adapt. The next attack will be different. She was right. 6 weeks after the first battle, the Council returned. This time they sent 800 ships. They bypassed the outer system entirely, jumping directly to Mars orbit. The message was clear. Earth itself was now a target. Admiral Constantine had anticipated this. He had positioned defensive platforms around the inner planets, hidden weapons in the asteroid belt, prepared every possible contingency. But 800 ships was an overwhelming force. The Second Battle of Sol began at dawn, Earth time. Council vessels emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of locusts, their weapons already charging. Human defense stations opened fire immediately, and space lit up with the exchange of energy weapons and missiles. This time the Council fought differently. They had studied human tactics, learned from their mistakes. They deployed in dispersed formations, making ramming attacks less effective. They used long-range bombardment, staying outside the range of human mines and traps. The battle raged for 3 days. Human crews fought with desperate determination, but the numbers were against them. One by one, defense stations fell. Ships were destroyed. Mars took orbital bombardment that killed thousands. But humanity had one advantage the Council had not anticipated. On occupied colonies throughout human space, civilians had become insurgents. On the mining colony of Proxima Station, workers seized control of a Council logistics hub. They destroyed supply depots and freed political prisoners. The Council garrison found themselves fighting door to door against miners armed with improvised weapons and stolen council equipment. On Europa, a group of scientists sabotaged the ice processing facilities that supplied water to council ships. The facility explosion took out a council resupply vessel docked nearby. On Titan, teenagers used hacked communication equipment to feed false intelligence to council commanders, sending patrols into ambushes prepared by resistance cells. The council had peacekeepers on a dozen human worlds. Those peacekeepers now found themselves in a nightmare. They could not tell civilians from insurgents. Every human was potentially hostile. The markets they patrolled might explode. The workers they oversaw might turn on them with tools as weapons. Council Commander Vex of the Korthax found himself pinned down in a hydroponics facility on Ganymede, his squad reduced from 20 to 7. Human colonists, armed with nothing more than cutting tools and homemade explosives, had ambushed his patrol. "This is not warfare," Vex transmitted to his superiors. "This is chaos. They do not wear uniforms. They do not follow conventions. How do we fight this?" The answer came back. Pacify the population by any means necessary. But every attempt at pacification created more insurgents. When council forces executed suspected rebels on Callisto, the entire colony rose in revolt when they bombed a resistance hideout on Ceres, killing civilians in the process. 3 more cells formed overnight. The Yithran warrior Kresh watched these events unfold from his home world. The council had stationed a garrison there, 200 soldiers meant to keep the Yithran population compliant. They had been there for 2 centuries, a visible reminder of who held power. Kresh gathered with other Yithran in secret in the old warrior halls that had been abandoned when the council took over. They spoke of the old days of honor and pride and the freedom to determine their own destiny. "The humans fight," Kresh said. "They show us it is possible." "The humans will lose," said Thren, an older Yithran who had lived through the original subjugation. "The council is too strong. They will be crushed like we were." "Perhaps," Kresh said, "but they fight with honor. They choose death over submission. We once believed the same. When did we forget?" The question hung in the air. Around the hall, Yithran warriors felt something awakening. The council had not broken them completely. The spark of resistance still existed, buried deep but not extinguished. On the Pelthine homeworld, engineer Telka studied the reports from human space. She saw the tactics, the improvised weapons, the desperate determination. As a master engineer, she recognized the genius and simplicity. Humans were using basic physics and chemistry to fight advanced technology. They were turning the council's complexity against itself. "We could do this," Telka said to her colleagues. "We built these systems. We know their weaknesses." "The council will kill us," one engineer said. "They are already killing us," Telka replied. "Just slowly, grinding us down generation by generation. Maybe the humans have the right idea. Better to die fighting than to fade into nothing." The council leadership, secure in their station orbiting the Valdrine homeworld, watched as their perfect system began to crack. High Counselor Vethrin called an emergency session. "The human problem is spreading," Thexkar reported. "We are receiving reports of unrest on 6 subjugated worlds. The Yithran are holding illegal gatherings. The Peltine are conducting work slowdowns. Even the Vraxi, who have been docile for 4 centuries, are showing signs of resistance." "Then we must make an example," Vethrin said. "Not just of humanity, but of any who would follow their path. Increase garrison forces on all worlds. Implement stricter controls. Show them the price of rebellion." But the order backfired. The increased military presence and harsher restrictions only fanned the flames. On the Yithran homeworld, the expanded garrison arrested Kresh and 50 other warriors for unauthorized assembly. The council planned a public trial and execution. Instead, they got an uprising. The Yithran had not fought in 200 years, but they remembered how. They had been workers and laborers, but they had once been warriors. That night, Yithran across the planet rose up. They seized weapons from armories. They attacked council installations. The garrison of 200 found themselves facing a population of millions. Within 48 hours, the Yithran homeworld was free. The council garrison had been destroyed or driven off-world. Kresh stood in the central plaza, holding the banner of the old Yithran warrior clans. "We are free," he announced, "and we will stay free. Any who would put chains on us again will face the same fate as the council garrison." The news reached Earth 3 days later. Admiral Constantine watched the footage of Ythron warriors celebrating their liberation. A smile crossed his weathered face. "It's spreading," he said to Dr. Okonkwo. "The council system is built on submission. Take away the submission and the whole thing falls apart." "They'll respond with overwhelming force," Okonkwo warned. "They have to, or they lose everything." "Let them," Constantine said. "Every ship they send to suppress the Ythron is a ship they can't send against us. And every species they attack drives more worlds into rebellion." The war had evolved beyond a human conflict. It had become something larger, something the Council had feared for millennia. A galaxy-wide uprising against their system of control. On the Peltine homeworld, engineer Telka sabotaged the power grid that supplied the Council garrison. In the darkness that followed, Peltine workers attacked with tools and homemade weapons. Their engineering expertise turned infrastructure into weapons. The Vraxi, patient and methodical, simply stopped working. No violence, no attacks, just a collective refusal to continue serving their masters. The Council's economy on Vraxi worlds ground to a halt. The Council found itself fighting a war on 24 fronts. Their fleets, designed for overwhelming force in single battles, were now scattered across the galaxy trying to suppress rebellions. Their peacekeepers, trained for occupying compliant populations, were being bled dry by guerrilla warfare. In the Third Battle of Sol, the Council attacked with 600 ships, reduced from 800 because they had to divert forces to suppress uprisings elsewhere. Admiral Constantine met them with 70 ships and an asteroid belt full of weapons. The battle was brutal, but humanity held. Ambassador Chen, who had returned to Unity Prime as part of a resistance cell, sent a message to every species in the galaxy. "The Council told us peace required our surrender. They were wrong. Real peace requires respect. It requires the freedom to say no. It requires the ability to defend yourself. We fought because we had no choice. But we also fought for you." Every species living under Council control. 18 months after the Battle of Neptune's Gate, the Galactic Council ceased to exist. The institution that had ruled for 10,000 years collapsed not with a final battle, but with a slow disintegration, as species after species withdrew their support. The end came in stages. First, the Ythron formally declared independence and refused to recognize Council authority. Then the Peltine followed. The Vraxi, the Ptolemites. Within 6 months, 20 species had broken away. The Council's response, sending enforcement fleets to each rebellious world, only spread their forces thinner and created more resentment. On Earth, President Ochoa stood in the ruins of what had been Geneva. A Council orbital strike had destroyed much of the city 8 months ago. 50,000 people had died. But Earth still stood. Humanity still fought. And now, finally, victory was within sight. Admiral Constantine stood beside her, older and more scarred than when this war had begun. He had lost an eye in the 5th Battle of Sol, taken shrapnel that the doctors said was too risky to fully remove. But he was alive, and his fleet, though battered, had never been defeated. "They're requesting terms," Constantine said, showing Ochoa the message from the Remnant Council leadership. "They want to negotiate a ceasefire." "No," Ochoa said immediately. "Not a ceasefire. A surrender, unconditional, and then trials for crimes against every species they've subjugated." The message went back. 3 days later, High Counselor Vethrin arrived on Earth. He came without guards, without ceremony, his silver skin somehow less lustrous than before. He looked diminished, an emperor reduced to a suppliant. They met in a temporary structure built over the ruins. Vethrin sat across from Ochoa, Constantine, and Dr. Okonkwo, who had documented every council crime for the upcoming tribunals. "You have won," Vethrin said quietly. "We acknowledge this. We seek terms that will allow for peace." "You don't get to define the terms," Ochoa said. "Not anymore. The council is dissolved. Your leadership will stand trial for crimes including genocide, enslavement, and systematic subjugation of sentient species. The evidence Dr. Okonkwo has compiled covers 10,000 years of abuse." "We maintained peace," Vethrin said, a hint of his old authority creeping back into his voice. "Whatever methods we used, we prevented war across the galaxy." "You prevented war by destroying anyone capable of fighting," Constantine said. "That's not peace. That's tyranny with good public relations." "And now?" Vethrin asked. "What comes after the council? Chaos? Every species fighting every other?" You humans and your allies may think you have won, but you have opened a door to a darkness you cannot imagine. Maybe, Okonkwo said, or maybe we'll build something better. Something based on actual consent and mutual respect instead of hidden clauses and forced compliance. The trials lasted 6 months. They were held on Unity Prime, the station that had once hosted humanity's celebration of joining the Council. Now it served as a courtroom where decades of lies and manipulation were finally exposed. The evidence was overwhelming. The Yithran had not been naturally inclined to give up warfare. They had been psychologically manipulated through education programs and cultural reforms, their warrior traditions systematically erased. When that had not been enough, the Council had used Article 286 to take direct control. The Peltine had not willingly turned over their technology. Council corporations had used economic pressure and legal manipulation to seize patents and designs, leaving the Peltine as workers in factories built with their own innovations. Species after species, the pattern repeated. The Council had refined their methods over millennia, learning how to break civilizations without obvious violence, how to enslave minds while claiming to liberate them. Vethran, Thexkar, and 17 other Council leaders were found guilty. The sentences varied. Some were imprisoned. Others were exiled to remote worlds under monitoring. The galaxy watched as the mighty fell. But justice was only the first step. The harder question remained: what would replace the Council? Admiral Constantin found himself in an unexpected role. The freed species looked to humanity for leadership, seeing Earth as the catalyst for liberation. But Constantine remembered the mistakes that had led to this war in the first place. We will not become what we defeated, he told the assembly of species representatives gathered on Unity Prime. Humanity will not rule the galaxy. No single species will. What we need is something new. Over the next months, representatives from 40 species worked to draft a new agreement. It was a painful process filled with arguments and compromises. But unlike the Council Treaty, everything was transparent. Every clause was debated openly. Every species had an equal voice. The resulting document was called the Free Species Compact. It was different from the Council Treaty in fundamental ways. First, it explicitly protected each species' right to maintain their own military forces. Second, it required unanimous consent for any major decision, not simple majority rule. Third, and most importantly, any species could withdraw at any time without penalty. This compact is an agreement among equals, Constantine said during the signing ceremony, not a surrender document disguised as peace. We recognize that peace requires strength, that trust must be earned, not demanded. We will not force anyone to join us, but if you do, you will be treated with respect. Kresh of the Yithran spoke next. The old warrior had become a hero to his people, a symbol of resistance and renewal. The humans taught us a valuable lesson. They trusted the Council and learned that trust without power is just slavery waiting to happen. But they also showed us something else. That standing alone is not the only alternative. We can work together, support each other while maintaining our sovereignty. Engineer Telka of the Peltine added her voice. The Council believed that peace required control. They were wrong. Peace requires respect. It requires transparency. It requires the ability to say no. This compact gives us that. 40 species signed the founding document. 20 more attended as observers, not yet ready to commit, but interested in this new approach. The old subjugated species were not the only ones watching. Many Council member species, those who had benefited from the old system, now found themselves isolated and uncertain. President Ochoa addressed them directly. To those who profited from the Council system, we offer a choice. Join us as equals or go your separate ways. But if you choose to join, you must accept that the age of easy dominance is over. You will compete fairly, trade honestly, and respect the sovereignty of others. If you cannot do that, then we have nothing to offer each other. Some refused. The Valdrine, proud and bitter, withdrew to their home system and closed their borders. They had been the Council's greatest champions, and they could not accept their diminished status. Others chose integration. The Hesh, who had been mid-level participants in the Council system, recognized that the galaxy had changed. They joined the Compact and began the difficult work of rebuilding their reputation. The Compact established a Free Species Defense Alliance. Unlike the Council Defense Force, which had been a tool of control, the alliance was a genuine mutual defense pact. Each species contributed ships and resources based on their capacity, not on quotas designed to leave them defenseless. Admiral Constantine became the first commander of the Alliance. He established headquarters on Unity Prime, now renamed Liberty Station. The symbolism was intentional. The place where humanity had been deceived would now serve as a symbol of honest cooperation. The first test came quickly. A species called the Zenthri, who had not been part of the Council system, launched raids against Alliance trade routes. They expected the response to be similar to the Council: diplomatic protests, economic sanctions, perhaps a blockade. Instead, they got a combined fleet of human Yithran and Pelthine ships that arrived in their system within a week. Constantine's message was brief. This is your only warning. Attack any Alliance member and you attack all of us. We are not the Council. We will not conquer you or subjugate you, but we will defend our own. Cease hostile action immediately, or face the consequences. The Zenthri looked at the assembled fleet, saw the mix of species working together, saw the obvious willingness to fight, and chose peace. Within a month, they had applied to join the Alliance. 2 years after the war ended, Constantine gave a speech at the Alliance's anniversary celebration. Representatives from 60 species attended, more than had ever been part of the Council. We learned something important, Constantine said. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's not submission to authority. Real peace is a balance. It's maintained by strength and mutual respect. It's built on honest relationships, not hidden clauses in treaties. He looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing the diversity of the galaxy represented in one room. The Council promised you peace if you gave up your power. We promise you nothing except honesty. Join us and you will keep your strength, your sovereignty, your right to say no. But you will also have allies, partners who will stand with you in times of need. Not because they are forced to, but because they choose to. He paused, remembering the long road that had led to this moment. The battles, the losses, the sacrifice. We trusted the Council once. They taught us to never make that mistake again. But they also taught us something else. They taught us what not to become. We will never be perfect.